There is a rumored tunnel known as the Urashima Tunnel, said to grant any wish to those who venture through it. However, the price is that the person will age 100 years in exchange for their desire. The story begins by introducing Kaoru Tono, a high school boy, who feels detached from the world after losing his sister Karen in an accident. One rainy day on his way home from school, Tono meets Anzu Hanashiro at the train station, a girl he's never seen before, though she's wearing his school's uniform. Their encounter is somewhat tense as Hanashiro catches Tono staring at her and calls him out for it. After a few moments of silence, Tono notices Hanashiro trying to shield her bag from the rain. He offers his umbrella to her, and after a brief hesitation, Hanashiro accepts. She suggests they exchange names and phone numbers so she can return his umbrella later. In the morning, a few days later, Tono is in class, gazing out the window, when his teacher arrives along with a new transfer student from Tokyo, Hanashiro. The two immediately recognize each other. Standing at the front of the class, Hanashiro is asked to introduce herself to her new classmates, but she simply replies that she has nothing to say and asks to take her seat. Throughout the day, Hanashiro's classmates make various attempts to warm up to her. They approach her with friendly smiles and casual conversations, eager to include her in their groups. However, Hanashiro remains distant, her demeanor cold and uninviting. She responds with short answers and a hint of annoyance, clearly indicating her disinterest in their attempts at friendship. Eventually, a female classmate confronts her about her condescending and self-important behavior. Hanashiro ignores her and continues reading her manga, prompting the classmate to snatch it from her hands and drop it on the ground. In response, Hanashiro strikes her classmate in the face, causing her nose to bleed. Tono and several other classmates witness the entire encounter. In the next scene, we glimpse Tono's home life, marked by tension between him and his father, who is perpetually drunk and bitter towards both Tono and his ex-wife. Today is the anniversary of his sister Karen's death, and in a fit of rage, his father physically abuses Tono, blaming him for Karen's death and declaring that he would rather have her back than him. Unable to endure any more of his father's abuse, Tono flees his home and runs aimlessly until he reaches an isolated tunnel near the train tracks. Driven by a mix of curiosity and apprehension, Tono steps into the tunnel, steeped in mystery and an unsettling aura. Water floods the ground at his feet, and vivid, bright red trees line the path, standing parallel to each other. As Tono ventures deeper into the cold tunnel, he spots a shoe in the middle of the path. It belongs to his late little sister Karen. Unable to comprehend this discovery, he runs further into the tunnel, only to encounter his deceased pet parakeet, somehow alive. Realizing that this must be the Urashima Tunnel, Tono decides to run back out, taking his pet parakeet and his sister's shoe with him. Tono returns home to find his father waiting for him, who embraces him and slurs an apology, claiming he was drunk and asking Tono not to run away again. Confused, Tono is taken aback when his father asks whose place he had been staying at for the last week. Checking his phone, Tono discovers that a whole week has indeed passed. As Tono returns to school, Hanashiro asks where he has been for the past week. He tells her that he just caught the flu. Hanashiro then asks if he will be in school tomorrow, to which he replies yes, since she wants to finally return his umbrella to him. Later that same day, Tono decides to revisit the Urashima Tunnel. Just as he had brought back his supposedly dead pet parakeet, he hopes to somehow return his deceased sister from the tunnel. As he walks deeper into the tunnel, calling out for his sister, he unexpectedly encounters Hanashiro, who is also in the tunnel. Remembering that time shifts if they stay inside for too long, Tono urges her to leave with him. Upon exiting, they find that it is now nighttime. A confused Hanashiro demands that Tono explains what that place was. Sitting just outside the tunnel, Tono and Hanashiro decide to delve deeper into the enigma of the Urashima Tunnel, eager to understand its mysterious allure and the rumors surrounding it. They discover that while only a few seconds pass inside the tunnel, hours can slip by in the outside world, and in exchange for this time distortion, the tunnel can grant any wish. Hanashiro proposes that they form a pact, agreeing not to disclose the tunnel's existence to anyone and to work together to achieve their desires. Tono accepts the proposition, and they shake on it to seal their agreement. The following afternoon after school, the two meet outside the Urashima Tunnel to conduct a test and learn more accurately about the time shift inside it. they decide to use their mobile phones. Tono will walk further into the tunnel while Hanashiro waits outside, and they'll call each other. Their phone connection disconnects at the point they call the column of maples, marking the place where time begins to shift inside the tunnel. Over the following afternoons, they continue running tests on the tunnel. They discover that if they turn back just 3 seconds after passing the column of maples, 2 hours will have passed in the outside world. They also find that they can send texts while inside the tunnel, which reach the recipient after the same amount of time has passed, but text cannot be sent to someone already inside the tunnel. As they continue working together, Tono and Hanashiro grow closer, developing a strong bond and confiding in each other about their personal lives and hardships. They consistently stay in touch and update each other via texts, even visiting each other's houses, going to the aquarium, and sharing their innermost thoughts and feelings. Tono reveals to Hanashiro that his little sister, Karen, died after falling from a tree. They were close siblings, but on the day of her death, they had a petty argument. Karen had climbed the tree to catch a rhinoceros beetle for Tono when she tragically fell. Ever since that day, Tono's family life has been shattered. Driven by grief, he longs for nothing more than to bring his little sister back. With careful planning and to avoid arousing suspicion from outsiders, Tono and Hanashiro decide to use a 3-day weekend to enter the Urashima Tunnel in search of what they desire. They agree to spend no more than 108 seconds inside the tunnel. Together, they sprint further in, with Tono constantly glancing at his watch to keep track of their time. After encountering nothing new, it's time to turn back when suddenly sheets of paper fly towards them, scattering across the water below. Unwilling to leave without gathering the papers, Hanashiro tells Tono to go ahead without her. However, he decides to help her collect the scattered sheets. The two work quickly to gather all the papers before running back toward the exit. Upon exiting, Tono checks his watch and realizes they have spent a few seconds longer than their planned 108 seconds. It is now 4 a.m., and, unwilling to explain his absence to his dad, Tono accepts Hanashiro's invitation to her place, where she lives alone. As he looks around her room, he notices a large collection of manga by Mitsuo Hanashiro, whom he realizes is her grandfather. Tono deduces that Hanashiro is an aspiring manga artist herself, and the scattered pages they collected from the Urashima Tunnel are actually her own works. Hanashiro confides in Tono, admitting that she doubts her manga is good enough to make a name for herself. Her parents, disapproving of her career path just as they did with her grandfather, dismissed her passion, an attitude that eventually led her to live on her own. The manga pages they retrieved from the tunnel were her first serious works, which her father had found and discarded. She reveals her true wish from the Urashima Tunnel is to possess a talent so exceptional that she can rise above all other manga artists. After a heartfelt conversation, they come to an agreement. The next time they enter the tunnel, on August 2nd, the date Tono has chosen, neither will leave until they achieve what they desire most. For Tono, it's the return of his sister, Karen. For Hanashiro, it's the exceptional talent to become an outstanding manga artist. As their closeness and comfort with each other grow over the weeks, they decide to attend a festival together. Amid the festivities, they entertain the possibility that, by the time they exit the Urashima Tunnel, as much as 1,000 years could have passed in the outside world. Curious, Hanashiro asks why Tono chose August 2nd as the day they will enter the tunnel. Tono reveals that it is the anniversary of Karen's death. The scene ends with the two interlocking hands as they watch the fireworks illuminate the night sky. Upon arriving home, Tono is greeted by his father and a woman, whom his father introduces as his future new wife. As his father talks on about his plans for a new job, moving to Tokyo, and starting a new life together, Tono has a nervous breakdown, overwhelmed by the sudden changes. He breaks down, crying and even vomiting on the floor. Angry and frustrated, his father shoves him out of the room, and Tono retreats to his own room for the night. The next morning, after spending the night sleeping on the floor, Tono wakes to a text from Hanashiro, asking if he can meet her for lunch. They meet up at a cafe where Hanashiro shares that, despite her doubts, she submitted her manga work, and unexpectedly received a call from a magazine editor who liked her work and invited her to create more. Tono praises her for this accomplishment, but Hanashiro downplays it. Tono then suggests that maybe they should postpone their plan to enter the Urashima Tunnel, so she can consider this opportunity more seriously. Annoyed, Hanashiro insists there's no reason to delay. After some back and forth, she finally admits she's uncertain about what the right decision is for her anymore. August 2nd arrives, but Hanashiro is unable to reach Tono. Worried, she decides to go to his house where she is met by Tono's father, who tells her that Tono left the house last night and hasn't returned. Realizing where he must have gone, Hanashiro rushes toward the Urashima Tunnel. Just as she reaches the tunnel entrance, she receives a long text message from Tono. In the message, he explains that he is already deep inside the tunnel as she reads it. He tells her she has no need to enter the tunnel, as she already possesses the special talent she's been searching for. He expresses his hope to one day read all of her work and encourages her to keep drawing, despite her self-doubt. Tono then reveals a truth about the Urashima Tunnel, that it's not a place where one can get just anything they desire, but rather a place where one can reclaim something they've lost. Because of this, he explains, she won't find the talent she seeks there. Hanashiro feels a mix of anger and sorrow as she finishes reading Tono's final message to her. Inside the tunnel, Tono has now traveled for 14.5 hours, which is equivalent to 4 years in the outside world. Exhausted and still unable to find his sister Karen, he suddenly spots a shimmering door and rushes towards it. Opening the door, Tono finds himself in a dreamlike world where Karen is alive. The two joyfully interact as they always had, until Tono notices his phone buzzing with floods of texts from Hanashiro, updating him about her life, her graduation, and her success as a manga artist. Tono is surprised by this, as he had previously confirmed that texts could not be received by someone within the tunnel. Karen notices the floods of texts and teases him, asking if the messages are from a girl he likes. She encourages him to pursue his happiness and love, saying that it would make her happy if he was happy as well. With his sister's blessing, Tono races out of the tunnel, filled with the hope of reuniting with Hanashiro, and sends her a text as he makes his way back. 8 years have passed in the outside world, and Hanashiro has become a successful manga artist. She often finds herself thinking about Tono, still using his old umbrella and sending him texts that remain unanswered. Distracted by her feelings and unable to focus on her work, she takes time off and ends up at the same station where she first met Tono. There, overwhelmed by memories, she breaks down in tears until her phone buzzes. She looks down to see a text from Tono that simply reads, "I love you." Upon reading his message, Hanashiro immediately rushes toward the Urashima Tunnel, her heart filled with hope and longing. The two reunite inside the tunnel, with Tono waking up after fainting from exhaustion and tripping just after sending his text message to Hanashiro. They share a long, heartfelt kiss. When they finally exit the tunnel together, it is now a red autumn, and a total of 13 years and 102 days have passed. They come to understand that the reason Tono was able to receive Hanashiro's texts was because, in a way, he had lost her, allowing their connection to bridge the tunnel's time distortion. As rain begins to fall, Hanashiro lifts the umbrella she's kept all these years, smiling as she fulfills her promise to return it to him after all this time.